Did Pam Bondi just get caught in the middle of Epstein's billion-dollar money trail? On the Senate floor, investigators revealed 4,125 wire transfers, over $1.1 billion, hidden inside a Treasury file no one was supposed to see. And when Bondi's name surfaced in the request to release it, everything changed. What you're about to see isn't just another hearing. It's the moment secrecy meets accountability. Watch closely, because these numbers don't lie, even if the people guarding them do.
The president had run on a campaign with a promise to expose the Epstein files. Now he and the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, say, nope, nothing to investigate. When it comes to Epstein and sex trafficking, all these claims are just ludicrous. I want the American people to know that that's wrong. If you want to know why, just look at the latest report from our investigators that was discussed in the New York Times this morning. Now, somewhere in the Treasury Department, Mr. President, locked away in a cabinet drawer, is a big Epstein file that's full of actionable information. Follow the money details about his financing and operations that await investigation. Last year, the Biden administration allowed our investigators to look at portions of the file. We did that at the Treasury building. Here is what it says. Treasury's Epstein file details, Mr. President, 4,725 wire transfers. Let me repeat that. 4,725 wire transfers, adding up to nearly $1.1 billion flowing in and out of just one of Mr. Epstein's bank accounts. If you ask me, that is more than 4,000 potential lines of investigation right there. Hundreds of millions more flowed through other accounts. That's even a lot more to investigate. The file shows that Mr. Epstein used multiple Russian banks, which are now under sanctions, to process payments related to sex trafficking. A lot of the women and girls he targeted came from Russia, Belarus, Turkey, and elsewhere. One shudders to think about the kinds of people who must have been involved in trafficking these women and young girls out of those companies and into the Epstein web of abuse. Again, these are all potential leads, Mr. President, the Department of Justice ought to be digging into. This is about years and years of international sex trafficking. None of this is a hoax. None of it is a scam. And I'd like to say I consider it insulting to the intelligence of the American people for the Trump administration to simply say there is nothing to investigate here. Now, when the Trump administration came in with a lot of fanfare about transparency and openness, I said, I'm going to follow up on that. So I wrote to the Attorney General, Ms. Bondi, Treasury Secretary Bessent, FBI Director Patel, and I asked them all to produce the Epstein file to the Senate Finance Committee so it could be reviewed. In fact, I've made that request multiple times. The Trump commitment to transparency, based on the response, didn't mean a whole lot because they just refused. Here's what one Treasury official wrote back to me. I'll quote here. The Department of Treasury has previously made documents available relating to the matter in response to your inquiries. Accordingly, we understand that you have the information you seek from the Treasury related to this request. We thank you for your attention to this important issue. Mr. President, for anybody who's familiar with how these discussions go in Washington, D.C., what I just read was code for the bureaucracy saying, you're asking for information, go pound sand. The Trump administration may be trying to close the books on the Epstein sex trafficking. But I want it understood, as a senior member of the Senate Finance Committee, where we spend a lot of time looking at where substantial sums of money are going, particularly if they may be promoting wrongdoing and helping to evade taxes. We are going to stay on this fight to hold the wealthy individuals accountable for the harm that they clearly were involved in injuring the young women and others in this sex trafficking. So I'm going to have more follow-up for Attorney General Bondi very quickly. As for today, Mr. President, if she doesn't want to do the investigating, doesn't want the DOJ to do it, let me just restate my original demand. Have that Treasury information given to the Senate Finance Committee and have us, on a bipartisan basis, do our work. That's what we do in important investigations. If the Trump people believe they need additional authority to carry out the requests that I make again this afternoon, let me offer to help them write the bill myself. The idea that there is nothing more to investigate, not when you have 4,000 wire transfers, many of them associated with the possibility of wrongdoing and sex traffic promoting. The idea that you have that and there's nothing to investigate when it comes to the Epstein sex trafficking operation is ridiculous. Pam Bondi was the Attorney General in the state of Florida, where a lot of the Epstein crimes were committed. The Attorney General ought to know better, of all people. Mr. President, I can't begin to understand the President's handling of this or why he thinks this is just going to go away. But I'm here to say that our investigators have spent 3 full years looking into this. And the reason why is because we feel so strongly about the horror of sex trafficking and our commitment to root it out. The President of the Senate is new to this body, but I'm sure he's dealt with these issues before. You can't have a much bigger horror in front of you than sex trafficking.
It all began when Senator Ron Wyden started asking questions no one wanted to answer. His target? A former Attorney General named Pam Bondi. His topic? Not just oversight, but a sealed Treasury file that could expose the billion-dollar skeleton hiding behind the Epstein network. At first, it sounded routine. A senator asking about a missing report. Then came the line that froze the chamber. Why is this file still locked, and who's protecting it? The laughter stopped. The tone shifted. And before anyone realized it, the hearing was no longer about fiscal transparency. It was about secrecy, money, and the kind of silence that costs lives. Months earlier, an internal memo had surfaced. Inside, 4,725 wire transfers. Just over $1.1 billion moving through accounts tied to the Epstein network. Not rumor, not speculation. A documented trail of money that someone had buried deep inside the Treasury vaults. When Wyden's investigators traced the numbers, the pattern snapped into focus. Transfers matched overseas flights. Shell companies appeared, disappeared, then reappeared under new names. And threaded through it all were banks already sanctioned for laundering and fraud. He read the numbers twice, almost to prove they were real. 4,125 transfers, each one a breadcrumb on a map that led somewhere powerful. Then came the twist. The person who once promised transparency, Pam Bondi, was named in correspondence between Treasury lawyers discussing access to the Epstein files. 1 week the file was on her desk. The next, it had no record of existence. When Wyden pressed for clarity, agencies circled the wagons. Treasury said they'd already provided the materials. Justice said the inquiry was under internal review. In Washington speak, That means one thing: go away. But Wyden didn't. He told the chamber what his team had seen with their own eyes: structured payments, repeated timestamps, and transaction codes linking multiple foreign banks to accounts on U.S. soil. The victims connected to those transactions came from the same regions those banks served. It wasn't random, it was infrastructure, a system built to convert exploitation into revenue. If a senator can't obtain a file proving financial crimes tied to trafficking, Wyden said, what chance does an ordinary citizen have? The room fell silent, because everyone knew he was right. Bondi's office declined to comment. The department issued a single sentence: all relevant information has been provided. No follow-up, no press conference, just absence, the kind of quiet that follows when a door is locked from the inside. The public had been told for years the Epstein scandal was closed. That justice, however incomplete, had been done. But money doesn't vanish when a man does. Those billions still pulse through shell corporations and offshore trusts, the lifeblood of a network that refuses to die. Wyden's frustration was visible. He reminded his colleagues that oversight isn't optional, it's the spine of accountability. Yet when it came to Epstein, the watchdogs were ordered to heel. Transparency without access, he said, is theater. And in that moment, the hearing turned from politics into something larger, a mirror held up to the system itself. The most striking part of the exchange wasn't the outrage, it was the silence. Lawmakers averted their eyes, staffers froze, and the sound of paper shuffling filled the air where answers should have been. Why? Wyden asked quietly. Are we spending so much political capital to keep this file from seeing daylight? No one replied. Because in Washington, silence often says more than denial ever could. The Epstein files isn't just about numbers, it's about who decides what the public is allowed to know. And right now, that decision seems to rest with people who would rather let the story fade than let the truth come out. But stories have a way of resurfacing. And Pam Bondi's name? It's already written in the footnotes of this one.